I'm joined now by my guest, who is an energy expert and the programs manager at Clean Energy or Clean Tech Hub, and he is here with me on the program. I'm joined by Abel Gaiya. Thank you for joining us on Business Daily today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you join us on the program. But let us begin by you just, reacting to the interesting comments that we have received on social media. I mean, Nigeria is still on the way to fully, embracing renewable energy. And of course, we have a plan in the books, but most people will say that implementation, unfortunately, is always, being the major challenge here in Nigeria. But let us hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so this is actually a common response to the proposition that electric mobility should be expanded in Nigeria and even in other parts of Africa, since the largest energy deficit in the world occurs in Africa. So over 600 million people lack access to electricity, and Nigeria makes up the largest portion of that, which is 91 million people. But within the sector itself, you will see that out of the over 30 electric vehicle assemblers and manufacturers and service companies in Nigeria, they all think renewable energy when they are talking about powering the electric vehicles. So when you purchase a vehicle, they also have charging station providers, and the charging stations themselves are reliant on solar technology. So you have your vehicle that you purchase, and then you have your charging infrastructure that is situated at your house or wherever, your office or wherever you like, and that is powered by solar. So there is a reasonable extent of availability of electricity to power the vehicles.
But generally speaking, looking at a broader assessment of, the adoption of renewable energy as a country, speaking of Nigeria, how would you assess Nigeria's level of adoption so far?
Yeah, so Nigeria has moved from, since the REMP, Nigeria has moved from a complete focus on extending the national grid as the means of expanding electricity access. So there is now what they call, or what the government calls, a least cost electrification approach, where for a certain percentage of the unelectrified population, grid extension is the least cost method of electrifying them. For another percentage, which is around 30%, mini grids, solar mini grids are the least cost electrification approach. And then for the last percentage, solar home systems, rooftop solar is the least cost electrification approach. So in light of this, the Rural Electrification Agency has done some good work in sparking up the renewable energy expansion in Nigeria, particularly for rural and peri-urban communities. But a lot more needs to be done, because unlike the traditional power sector, where it's about a small number of large projects, so you can have a hydropower plant that is about 700 megawatts. In contrast, a mini grid is ring-fenced around a community that can power like 500 households, 1,000 households, and these represent a large number of small projects. So you need more than 6,000 mini grids to electrify about 6,000 communities across Nigeria. So that makes it that brings its own challenges that stakeholders in the sector and the Rural Electrification Agency, as well as NEC, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, trying to solve. But we see more progress in that area of mini grids than we see in larger utility scale solar or utility scale renewable energy generally.
Well said. We are discussing on Nigeria's progress so far in the area of, adopting renewable energy. But at this point, we will go on a short break. When we return, the conversation continues. And my guest, who is Abel Gaiya, is an energy expert and a programs manager at Clean Tech Hub, is still with me. So do stay. We'll be right back. And you are still watching Business Daily, coming to you live on Trust TV. And just before the break, we started a conversation on today's edition of the program, and the focus is on Nigeria's renewable energy journey. How far so far? But I still have my guest here with me, who is an energy expert and a deputy programs manager at Clean Tech Hub, in the person of Abel Gaiya. Thank you again for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, we started the conversation by speaking on, the levels of adoption so far, but let us move on now to the potential of renewable energy here in Nigeria. I mean, with the specific sources, solar, wind, hydro, and the likes, and then looking at the climate and the geography of Nigeria, which of these options, holds the most promise for Nigeria?
Thank you. So, in terms of geographical dispersion or variation in the potential for renewable energy, you see first that solar is the cheapest at the moment.
And the most common.
The most common, exactly. So it's the most common because it's the most cheapest.
Oh, I see.
It's the cheapest. And but you also have potential for wind energy, especially in northern areas such as Katsina, where the first wind farm in West Africa was attempted, but unfortunately it did not work out. And you have potential, as you know, for large hydro. We already depend for about 15% of our electricity on the national grid on hydro, large hydro, so Kainji Dam, Zungeru, and the rest. But there's also potential for small hydro in places where there are rivers and streams that you can put in small hydro power systems that can power a community or a couple of communities. But right now, the focus, including in government projects, so the demonstration projects that the Energy Commission of Nigeria has undertaken, the projects that the Rural Electrification Agency has undertaken across its programs, and then at the private sector level for households, the most common is then solar home systems, rooftop solar you have on your roofs or in your car parks and so on. So these are the potentials. If we can perform more demonstration projects in small hydro and wind power, then we would be able to balance a little, especially in terms of integrating them into the national grid. So yeah.
Okay, speaking of national grid, so far in the year 2024, I believe we've had a collapse about 4 different times now, unfortunately so, but that is our reality. So I will want for you to speak regarding, the feasibility, of Nigeria to rely heavily on renewable energy. Is it sufficient to meet our growing demand for energy, considering, the geographical landmass of Nigeria as a nation and the level of energy demands across the nation? Is it sufficient?
Yeah, so the sufficiency relies a lot on the ability to create a mix of implement a mix of renewable energy sources. So we can't rely on hydro alone, because there are years where there are droughts and the level of water, dammed water is low, and so that creates intermittency in the supply of energy. The same for solar, where there's a lot of so whether during the rainy season there is a slight drop in the amount of electricity produced, and also in wind power as well. So the ability to for this to be sufficient relies on the hybridization of the systems. So if you can have a solar mini grid system with a lot of battery storage, so that you can have that supply all through a day. You can also have systems that incorporate two different renewable energy systems, solar and wind, for example. But in terms of the level of progress at the moment and the energy demand growth that Nigeria requires, or Nigeria will see until 2030, 2050, 2060, a lot of the energy, and this is also conceptualized in government frameworks, will still come from, say, natural gas and other sources. Renewable energy will can reach a significant percentage, like a third, but yeah, there are still challenges to bring it to say half the energy mix in Nigeria.
Okay, well said. There are targets that have been put in place by the government. I did mention one, that is the Renewable Energy Master Plan, that seeks to increase the supply of renewable energy to about 36% by 2030. There are a lot more other targets, but I'll just leave it at that. So I would like for you to speak regarding these targets. Some may say that these are, targets that are on paper, but we are not seeing, actionable plans to reaching those targets. Do you agree with that school of thought?
Yeah. So the problem is that the Nigerian factor is very, very relevant in this case. So
what do you mean when you say Nigerian factor?
So you will see the difficulties or the failures of the national government in spurring industrial development, for example, since the 1960s. And you also see similar problems when it comes to renewable energy. So the first wind farm that I mentioned was started in around 2010 in Katsina State, under Governor in Katsina State at the moment, and then transferred to the federal government in 2012. But since 2012 till now, the wind farm has been moribund. So there were different problems. Boko Haram kidnapped some engineers. There was vandalization of the thing, and you will see similar problems with the 14 solar independent power projects, large-scale solar. Each of them was about 100 megawatts. So these were significant if they had been successful, but there were difficulties in the companies securing financing. The government was unable or not prepared to provide credit guarantees to guarantee investments in the sector. So those 14 IPPs were also lagged significantly. So the progress that has been made so far has largely been in large hydropower, which we traditionally have relied on to a significant extent, but also in solar mini grids and private sector solar home systems. So because these ones that have been growing are small scale systems, they are not contributing as much in terms of percentage to the total energy mix. So it's still less than 2% dependence on solar, despite all the millions of solar systems that have been sold, or the mini grids, around 200 mini grids that have been sold. So there's a long way to go. We'll likely not achieve those goals, but things are still happening.
Well, like you rightly have stated, things are indeed happening. You did mention the progress so far, especially in rural areas. But I still want for us to, speak on, government support in promoting renewable energy. What additional steps would you recommend? Of course, you have pointed out some of the progress that we've seen, or the efforts that we've seen come from government. But we will want to, hear from you regarding the additional steps that can be taken to hasten or make faster this transition to renewable energy across the nation. What would your recommendations be?
Yes, so we need more communities. Just as communities are active in, say, sending letters to their discos, asking them to revamp their distribution infrastructure, or even contributing money to buy a new transformer and so on. We want more communities, more rural communities, to be able to initiate their own solar mini-grid projects, which is what we're also doing at Cleantech Hub, it's Renewable Energy Institute and the Green Work, creating tools for local communities to initiate that process and approach project developers, approach financiers to install a mini-grid in their community. And hopefully the Rural Electrification Agency would also create a facility where a state government or a community can approach it and say, okay, we have counterpart funding. We're looking for matching funds to install a mini grid in our community. So please support us. So if we have that kind of facility, and then you'll see some more rural activity in the mini grid sector, but also regulatory barriers as well. So because, as I said, the mini grid sector is a large number of small projects, the regulations, the mini grid regulations 2016 initially required regulatory approval per site. So if you have thousands of sites, you have to do regulatory approval for each site individually. But this was changed with the 2023 mini grid regulations, where a developer can obtain approval for a portfolio or a bundle of sites at once, so that it reduces the transaction costs for electrifying each site. But you also need forms of private project financing as well that allows you to get investments for a bundle of sites, rather than get investors who are interested in each one site. And that excludes large investors that are willing to give, say, 1.5 million and above $10 million. But if you are coming to them for one site that costs only $100,000, then you can't engage them. So these are the institutional and policy and regulatory innovations that we need to happen.
But I will want for you to emphasize more on the role that local communities play. You've pointed out, you have given an instance, so far, but I would like for you to emphasize more on that. Has there been cases where, local communities have successfully adopted renewable energy by coming together, like you rightly mentioned? Are there examples you would like to make reference to?
Yeah, so the examples that exist at the moment are examples of, say, a staff of the Transmission Company of Nigeria, or a representative in a state House of Assembly initiates that process and approaches REA on behalf of the community that they represent or they are involved in. But at the moment, you don't have communities themselves being aware enough and having the necessary tools to initiate that on their own, which is why we started this project in 2021. And what you also want to have is a significant number of mini grids also community owned. So right now in Latin America, South Asia, and other parts, the Middle East, there are examples of communities that initiated that process, and then they create a cooperative, an electricity cooperative, and legally own the mini grid. But then you don't have that in Nigeria at the moment, which speaks to the inadequate level of activity among rural communities in that area. So that is also partly what we are advocating for. Especially when you talk to developers, they are often hesitant to give like a percentage of equity of the mini grid system, or the community owns the generation infrastructure while the developer owns the distribution infrastructure. So there's hesitancy among developers, which is why we are also advocating for the mini grid regulations 2023 and the Rural Electricity Users Cooperative Framework by REA to make explicit provision for community-owned mini-grids and solar systems.
Well said. But let us now move to speaking about investment, the investment climate here in Nigeria. How would you assess the investment climate for renewable energy, especially in the current year, that is 2024?
Yeah, so the investment climate at the moment is very uneven. So much of the private sector investments and investment by households is by upper middle class and high income households in solar home systems. And then you have in the middle solar mini grids, where a lot of the investment comes as equity investments in mini grid companies that mini grid companies are able to raise, and then public investment through the Nigeria Electrification Project, which was a $550 million project between 2018 and 2023, and now replaced by the distributed access to renewable energy scale-up projects that the REA will also be launching, which is a $750 million project. But then in the on-grid utility scale, so the DARES also includes interconnected mini-grids, so mini-grids that are in locations where distribution companies already have infrastructure, and then they connect that the distribution company, the community, and the mini-grid developer then agree to a 20-year contract where the mini-grid company manages that, revamps the distribution infrastructure, and after recoups its investments, then afterwards transfers ownership back to the distribution company, which is meant to feed in. They also pay a distribution fee as well, a user fee. So that's hopes to feed in liquidity into the distribution companies, and also give underserved communities. So underserved meaning they are connected to the national grid but don't have four hours of electricity exactly. So those are ways that investment is being approached.
But considering the current investment climate, has it been good, I should call it? Has it been good in recent times?
Not really. So especially the forex problem, a lot of mini grid components are imported. So that significantly raises the cost of installing a mini grid, the capex, the capital expenditure. And some mini grid developers have divested a little because unless you have a grant that is willing to cover that level of amounts that you need to install a mini grid, it's sometimes difficult to get private investment that can cover that, since the greater the capex, the greater the tariffs that you have to charge to recoup your investments, and then the less willing that the community is willing to accept that tariff. So the macroeconomic situation at the moment is very disappointing for the mini grid and the general renewable energy sector. So you need solutions like exchange rates, forex insurance that can insure against fluctuations in the naira, and some other a massive expansion of grants financing as well to address these problems.
Well said. But let us now speak to issues around climate change and Nigeria's effort in the area of climate change mitigation. How would you juxtapose, or I would like for you to juxtapose the renewable energy adoption and climate change? Of course, there has been increased conversations around that in recent times, but let's hear from you. What targets should Nigeria have in place towards, in the area of renewable energy now, towards mitigating the effects of climate change?
Yes, so energy is one of the focus sectors in our nationally determined contributions, which contributes to a significant percentage of carbon emissions in Nigeria. And so decarbonizing the energy sector is one of the goals for achieving net zero by 2060, 2070. So what the government, at the moment, what Nigerians are attracted to and what donors are attracted to, what Nigerians are attracted to is the cost of renewable energy. They don't really, and compared to buying petrol, especially after subsidy removal, and buying diesel. So that is the selling point of renewable energy for most Nigerians. But donors also care about carbon emissions, and the government, through the National Council of Climate Change on climate change, also cares about emissions reductions. So that includes the current efforts to replace generators. For example, you see a donor like the ZGen initiative, the Zero Emissions Generator Initiative, seeking to approach renewable energy as replacing generator sets. So they are looking for innovators who are trying to innovate in say reusing generator sets in ways that are sustainable, or replacing generator sets with solar and battery storage and all that. So you have that dichotomy where for the common man, the focus is not really on climate change, it's more on cost related to generator sets, while for donors and certain government ministries, it's also on carbon emissions, which the challenges with developing renewable energy applies as a challenge in decarbonizing the renewable energy sector.
Okay, just before we go, in 1 minute, especially for the common man, like you mentioned, whose focus is on cost, I will want for you to educate that set or those sets of people on the social benefit and maybe the environmental benefit of renewable energy. Maybe 2 points each in 1 minute, please.
Okay, right now, renewable energy over its lifetime, so if you buy a solar for your home, say for 1.5 million or up to 10 million, for example, the cost of that over the lifetime of the system is currently lower than that of buying a generator and fueling it for that, say, 20-year period, for example. And right now, many people complain that the upfront cost is too high, and so many suppliers of renewable energy systems are also providing instrumental payments and different energy as a service services that can defray the costs. So you pay monthly, for example, over a period of, say, 2 years for the system. So in terms of cost, there are innovations happening, and you can go online or go through the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria website to see which developers you can approach for these kinds of facilities. There are also banks like Access Bank, FCMB, that are also creating solar loans.
Thank you very, very, very much. I have been speaking with Abel Gaiya, who is an energy expert and, of course, a deputy programs manager at Clean Tech Hub. And we have been speaking extensively to Nigeria's progress in the area of renewable energy. Very insightful conversation so far. Thank you very much for all the insights that you've shared with us on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And that's where we draw the curtains on today's edition of Business Daily. But keep the conversation going across all our social media accounts, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and of course on what's the last one now? On Instagram. And we'll be there to interact with you on all of your comments. So keep the conversation going. My name is Chiamaka Enendu. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.